I jolted awake to the shrill beeping of my alarm. Bleary-eyed, I slammed my hand down on the clock and silenced it. 7:55 p.m. I must have dozed off without meaning to. Groggily rubbing my eyes, I sat up on the couch and tried to gather my bearings. The TV was still on, playing some mindless sitcom rerun. That's when the emergency broadcast tones suddenly cut through the canned laughter, making me jump. The screen switched to a blue background with the words, "Emergency Alert," stamped across in bold white letters. My pulse quickened as I stared at the screen, waiting for the announcement. A robotic female voice began speaking. "Attention citizens! A mandatory curfew will begin in 5 minutes. All citizens must return to their homes immediately and remain indoors until further notice. Attention citizens!" The message repeated again as I sat there stunned. A curfew? Why? What was going on? I leapt up from the couch and ran to the window. The sun was just beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the rows of suburban houses lining the street. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. Families were piling into minivans. Couples were out walking their dogs. A few kids rode bikes down the sidewalk. Completely normal early evening scenes. I didn't understand. Why did we suddenly have a curfew? Why were we being ordered to stay inside? My mind was spinning with questions when the emergency alert repeated its ominous message, snapping me back to the urgency of the situation. I had only 5 minutes to get home. I ran to the front door and headed outside, jogging across the lawn to my car parked at the curb. As I slid into the driver's seat, I noticed my neighbors emerging from their houses too, exchanging confused and worried looks as they rushed to their vehicles. It was strangely quiet outside, except for the distant wail of sirens. I turned the key and the engine sputtered to life. Pulling away from the curb, I drove down the street toward my apartment. I lived alone in a small one-bedroom place just a few miles away. I weaved around other cars, everyone clearly in a hurry now as the curfew deadline approached. My pulse pounded in my ears. The sky was growing darker, the setting sun replaced by an eerie twilight. The streetlights flickered on, creating circles of yellow against the creeping shadows. I pressed harder on the gas, urging my old Civic to go faster. I had to get home. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex with 2 minutes to spare. Leaving the car haphazardly parked across 2 spaces, I ran to the entrance, my shoes pounding on the pavement. The normally bustling courtyard was now empty and quiet. I let myself in through the locked door and sprinted up 2 flights of stairs to my apartment on the 3rd floor. Fumbling with my keys, I unlocked the door and hurried inside, slamming it shut behind me. I was home. I leaned against the closed door, trying to catch my breath. What the hell was happening? Why was there a curfew all of a sudden? Going to the living room window, I looked outside. The parking lot was abandoned, and the street seemed empty from what I could see. An eerie silence hung over everything. It all seemed so surreal. I tried the TV, but it only displayed the emergency alert screen. No explanations. I checked my phone next. No new messages or missed calls, but I had no signal either. In fact, my phone couldn't connect to the internet at all. Some kind of widespread outage? Nothing about this made any sense. A loud bang outside made me jump. I stared out the window again, but didn't see anything unusual. Probably just a car backfiring, I told myself. I realized my hands were shaking slightly. I needed to calm down. Freaking out wouldn't help. I went to the kitchen to make some tea in an effort to soothe my rattled nerves. As I waited for the water to boil, I kept glancing anxiously out the window above the sink. The sky was nearly dark now. With the streetlights on, I couldn't see any stars. I stared up at the blackness, wondering what could possibly be happening out there. The shriek of the tea kettle made me flinch violently, the sound shattering the heavy silence. Laughing nervously at my reaction, I poured the hot water over a tea bag and took the mug to the living room. Sitting on the couch, I sipped the tea slowly, willing my heartbeat to slow down. Everything was fine, I assured myself. It was just some kind of emergency drill. Maybe a terrorist threat or something, nothing to panic over. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, the silence felt oppressive, like a weight pressing down all around me. I didn't dare turn on any lights for fear of attracting attention. Attention from what exactly, I wasn't sure. I just knew I needed to be as invisible as possible right now. Setting the tea down with my shaking hands, I groped beneath the couch and pulled out the wooden baseball bat I kept for protection. Holding it in my lap made me feel a tiny bit better. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling eerily between the buildings of the complex. It sounded almost like whispering voices out there. A loud thump on the ceiling made me gasp. Footsteps. Someone was upstairs. I strained my ears, listening. More faint thumps and footsteps, but my upstairs neighbor was an elderly woman who lived alone. She couldn't be making that noise. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. Someone else was in the building. But who? And why were they here when we were all under curfew? The footsteps grew louder, moving across the ceiling right above me. My heart pounded as I sat frozen on the couch, gripping the bat. Should I try to hide? Fight? The footsteps crossed the living room to the hallway where the bedrooms were. I heard a door creak open, then more footsteps moving inside a room above me. My mouth went dry and my stomach lurched with panic. I knew I should do something, but I was paralyzed by fear. The intruder was just above me, separated only by a thin ceiling. I pictured them lurking around, looking for valuables to steal, or worse. A loud thump sounded right over my head, making me yelp. That was it. I leapt off the couch, bat raised, and ran to the front door. I had to get out of here. I fumbled to unlock the deadbolts, my hands slippery with sweat. Come on, come on. I could still hear movement upstairs. Just as I managed to get the door open, a blood-curdling scream rang out from the floor above, followed by frightening crashes and bangs. It sounded like a violent struggle. The woman up there was in trouble, but what could I possibly do to help her? I hesitated in the open doorway, panting. Should I make a run for it? I looked out into the empty courtyard, obscured by shadows. A breeze curled around me, carrying a strange, rotten smell. There were no lights, no sign of any other living person nearby. Nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. Behind me, the woman's screams abruptly cut off, leaving just the banging and crashing overhead. As the noises grew fainter, like whoever was up there was moving away, I realized with dawning horror that I was utterly trapped. Going outside now would be a death sentence. Closing the door as quietly as possible, I locked it and backed away, gripping my useless bat. My mind raced as I tried to figure out any way I could escape this nightmare building. I could try making it to my car, speed off into the night, make it to the highway. But then what? Nowhere would be safe if this was some kind of coordinated attack. A loud bang at my door made me shriek. Someone was out there. More bangs followed as I stumbled backwards, reaching for any kind of weapon. Heavy footsteps moved down the hall, stopping outside my door. There was a scraping sound of metal on metal, then a pause. I held my breath, listening. My door was being unlocked from the outside. With a click, the handle turned slowly. The door creaked open, letting in only darkness. Gripping the bat with white knuckles, I planted my feet and got ready to swing with all my might. Just as a dark figure appeared in the doorway, I let out a roar and attacked. The bat collided with the person with a sickening crack. They collapsed on the floor with a howl of pain. In the gloom, all I could make out was a tall male silhouette. I raised the bat again, ready to strike. Wait, stop! The man threw his hands up. I'm not here to hurt you. Please! I hesitated, squinting down at him. He seemed unarmed. Who are you? I demanded. Why are you in my apartment? I'm Trent, your upstairs neighbor, he groaned, still on the floor. I heard screams and got scared. I thought I could hide in another apartment. My hands shook as I kept the bat aimed at him. The woman upstairs, is she? She's dead, Trent's voice broke. They got her. I heard it happen through the walls. I tried to get in her place, but the door was blocked. So I came down here. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. He buried his face in his hands, sobbing. I lowered the bat slightly, still wary but also feeling pity stir. He seemed genuinely terrified and upset. I knew the elderly woman who lived above me just from saying hello in passing. The thought of her being attacked and killed was horrifying. Come inside, quick, I said, closing the door behind Trent and locking it. I helped him over to the couch and hurried to the windows to make sure the curtains were fully closed. He watched me nervously in the dim light. What do you think is happening? Trent asked. Why is there a curfew? Who would hurt that poor woman? I sank onto the armchair across from him. I have no idea. Nothing about this makes sense. Have you seen anything or anyone else around? He shook his head. No. I've just been hiding in my apartment since the alert. I tried calling 911 but couldn't get through. Then I heard those screams. He shuddered, looking down at the floor. I studied him closely, still uncertain I could fully trust him. But he seemed genuinely scared and clueless, just like me. "Look, neither of us knows what's going on," I said. "But we'll be safer if we stick together. Those things, whoever or whatever they are going door to door, it seems. If we keep quiet and don't draw attention to ourselves, maybe they'll pass this place by." Trent nodded, wringing his hands anxiously. "You're probably right. Being alone right now, I don't think I can handle that." We both jumped as a loud crash echoed somewhere outside. I ran to peek out the window, seeing nothing but inky darkness. Adrenaline coursed through me as the horrors of our situation sunk in further. We were trapped here like sitting ducks. Over the next few hours, we sat in tense silence, listening to sporadic bangs and crashes outside. Sometimes it sounded close, other times farther away. The noises were impossible to identify specifically. Groans, growling, scraping, never anything normal like voices. Just eerie, unplaceable sounds that made my skin crawl. "Maybe we should try barricading the door," Trent whispered, after a particularly close thump against the outside wall. "Just in case." Working quietly in the dark, we pushed the heavy TV stand in front of the door and piled on chairs and side tables. It wouldn't stop a determined intruder indefinitely, but might buy us some time if needed. I clutched my bat, wishing desperately I owned a real weapon. Exhaustion eventually overtook fear, and we both passed out for a couple hours, taking turns sleeping while the other kept watch. The waiting game continued when we awoke before dawn. We took turns peering out the windows, but all was still cast in gloom outside. Sometimes I let myself believe help would arrive with the sunrise. The curfew would end and authorities would come with answers and safety. But as the sky slowly lit, the courtyard remained empty. No police cars, no voices on loudspeakers telling us it was over. There was only silence. When the bright morning sun finally illuminated the once cheerful suburban complex, Trent and I stared in silent horror at what it revealed. Smears of blood on walls and doors, shattered windows. Dark, lumpy forms sprawled on the ground that on second glance were horrifically not human. No sign of life anywhere, only carnage and emptiness. Whatever had caused this, whether disease or violence or something supernatural, had decimated everything in just one night. As we stood there peering out at the aftermath, a realization sank over us both. We were utterly alone now, two survivors of some kind of apocalyptic purge. Over the next few days, we explored cautiously outside but found no answers. We were able to scavenge some food and supplies from surrounding houses abandoned mid-meal. Radios and TVs emitted only static now. The internet was down, phones dead. Electricity still ran somehow, but every human in the area seemed to have just vanished. After 2 weeks, we had yet to find any other living people. Whatever this was appeared to have been swift and thorough. As we continued surviving off scraps, we eventually stopped looking for answers that would likely never come. There was only acceptance that this was our world now. A haunted, empty world where we only had each other. As time passed, we stuck together more out of existential fear than trust. Neither could bear the thought of being truly alone in this void. Sometimes at night, one of us would quietly break down crying, mourning all that was lost. The other would pretend not to notice, gazing out into the darkness where unknown threats still seemed to linger. We learned to avoid anything resembling other survivors. The vacant-eyed figures that shambled about, remnants of humanity but not the living. Their vacant moaning and grasping hands were a constant reminder of horrors best left unknown. Seasons changed, years passed in our self-imposed exile. We survived, but did not truly live. Only subsisted in our boarded-up refuge, forever haunted by the memories of that strange night when the dead walked and everything changed. Bound together by trauma, we endured this bleak existence side by side, two lonely souls inhabiting a dead world. This is our lives now, day after monotonous day, moving through the motions but no longer believing our futures will hold anything beyond this. There is no hope of change or rescue. There are no answers to cling to about why this happened. There is only here and now, in this place that is both our haven and our prison. This is simply how things are until the end, however and whenever that may come.